if you're 35, like I'm 35 now, if you're 35 and you've never come across this information before, and someone tells you this for the first time, how likely are you to not, to not completely crash out at the person and call the person an idiot? It's not very likely. So, which is why I think that the only chance of success that we really have is to capture the next generation and to shape them in the way that we want them to be shaped. Because currently, I say this as someone who comes from what you would consider to be fairly well-to-do background in Nigeria, right? The so-called elite this is not just in Nigeria, this is an African phenomenon.
Yes.
The so-called elites, the education that they give to their kids is a colonial education, bar none, 100%, right? I was lucky enough, so I was one of those kids who, because my parents were very, very sort of obsessed with giving us the best education. I went to some of the schools that have this sort of international standing in Nigeria, schools where you pay the fees in foreign currency, those kinds of schools, right? And I realized that when I look back on my former schoolmates, like when we have like get-togethers, 10-year reunion, 20-year reunions, I realized that if there was a cohort of maybe 50 graduating students, maybe there's like 10 left in the country. Everyone else
That's
is a high achiever, but they're a high achiever on another continent. And I realized that this is not just because they were fleeing a depressed economy back home. This is because the education itself was shaping us to do precisely that,
exactly.
right? So, and I don't mean this in a metaphorical sense. I mean this in a very, very literal
It's
sense.
it's it's a fact. There is a fact.
Yeah,
You're saying it exactly how it
yeah.
is. Yeah, it is.
So I went to a school called Grange, for example. Grange it's a British school which started off as a colonial school. When it started off, actually, black people weren't allowed to attend Grange School. I think it was from 1959 or so that it was opened up to the locals. It used to be only for the children of colonial officers, right? It was that kind of school. So I went to Grange, and I think back now, and I remember because we ran a British syllabus, and I remember in year 9 we were writing the key stage examinations, and we were studying history. What they said was history, and the subject history. Bear in mind, I'm growing up in Lagos, largest black city in the world, right? 17 million black people, right? Largest city in Africa, and we learned nothing about Nigerian history, nothing about African history, nothing about the global African diaspora, nothing. What we were taught as history was British World War One and World War Two history. So I can rattle off any number of facts to you about trench forts and the dreadnoughts and the Battle of the Somme. I can rattle off these things off the top of my head because I got an A in history, but it wasn't my history. So I graduated from high school and had no idea where I came from, right? I had this incredible identity crisis because that's what I was trained to have. So obviously, after finishing from there, your parents are pretty well to do in that part of the world. What's the next logical thing? They're going to send you off to university in the UK or in the US or in Canada or in Australia or somewhere in mainland Europe. And that's the end. You're never going to come back, right? So the fact that I even came back was kind of like an accident almost. But for the vast majority, get lost to the country forever. And then even if you do come back by accident, you basically just end up repeating the cycle. So you never actually train an elite class to actually take control of their society and take control of their narrative. You just train colonial droids to just continue perpetuating a system that they don't really understand, right? Because I didn't understand the system. I think my teachers didn't understand it either. I don't think most people understand. My parents certainly didn't understand it. All they knew was that this is a good school, that all the high society people want to send their kids to. It's like a status symbol to send your child here. And it costs an arm and a leg, but I'm willing to make that sacrifice to send you there. So you better get good grades. And when you get your good grades, that's it. Everyone is happy. And the wider purpose of what an education is completely lost. That was certainly my experience. So, I know that such efforts exist in Kenya. I've seen a couple. We actually did a story on one when I was at African Stream. But on this part of the continent, we're kind of like behind. So that's one of the projects I have for the coming 2 to 3 years, that we need to create this thing, because currently it
Yeah,
doesn't
we need to link up. We need to
The,
link up because
the
we're trying to create something back in Nigeria. Because I'm coming back to Nigeria as well. I'm coming. I'm going back on the ground very
the one in
shortly.
Kenya was co-opted. So
Yeah, it's been co-opted anyway.
really.
So
yep,
yeah. Because they have the baccalaureate kind of syllabus.
they connected with Europe. Yep,
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yep. And we tried to
yeah,
stop them, but nah,
yeah.
they didn't get
They
it.
came on our platform. We're still friends with them. So yeah, but yeah, that's what's happened. So
oh
yeah,
man,
yeah.
I didn't even know that. You know.
Yeah. They came on
Oh,
our platform, and we've been following them, and we saw what's going on. So
And I mean, just as we mentioned them, it's
wow.
important to say, like, have nothing to do with the Mzungu if you're trying to do something African. Just have
yeah,
nothing to do with
yeah,
them, because this is what they do. They
yeah.
detour you from, like, how the hell are you saying I'm an African school grounded on African ways when you're now bringing partnership and joining a Western, like, why? And then we try to tell you and you don't get it.
Yeah. Sadly, we get co-opted. So, and this is the challenge facing Africa because we would do so well, but the tentacles of capitalism always
It's
seem to
that
find its
thing.
way in.
It's that thing again of not understanding
But
how
also,
everything is war.
and our
Yeah,
our need for easy solutions, that, like, our hesitance to struggle, our fear of struggle, because to build a good African thing in this situation, you're going to struggle.
It's hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You got to work hard.
So they're being
It's
given
gonna
an easy solution and they were like, oh,
okay. You know what? Where we are is actually brilliant because it's about decolonizing the mind anyway. So yeah, brilliant. So yeah, because what we talk about most of the time, it kind of fits in perfectly. But let's go to the topic though.
yes, thank you.
Venezuela.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on Venezuela, and what do you think? How do you obviously I know what you're gonna say anyway, but how do you think this fits in for people who don't know? Because Africans, as always, miseducated, indoctrinated. Obviously, Nigeria got bombed the other day, and I saw Nigerians, clapping their hands and welcoming, welcoming Trump, and I was angry. I saw Venezuela, I was angry. Nigeria, I was angry. But this is to Africans mainly. Please speak to what do you see in Venezuela? What do you see in Africa? How do you see this? Because for me personally, my thought is this is detrimental to Africa. Okay, please, David, your thoughts.
So the first thing it does is that it creates precedent. Um, if because really what this is, let's not mince words. This is colonization. This is not neo-colonization. This is colonization in a very direct way, right? This has been, if you like, the dream of the usual suspects for the past few decades. Like they so I spent a lot of time in the UK, and it was a normal thing you would hear expressed in popular culture that, oh, this was what lost Britain the empire. This was how we lost our empire, right? When we used to run an empire, when we used to run the world. This is a very common,
Mm-hmm.
uh, what's the word, sentiment that is expressed.
Mm-hmm.
So you could tell that for the longest time there's been that desire to get past the era of neocolonialism and having to go through the World Bank and IMF and all these slow institutions, and get back to, as Eric Prince put it, wearing their imperial hat.
Direct colonialism. Yep.
And that's what this is. um, I suspect that the reason why Donald Trump is making all of this, is making such a spectacle out of all of this, and he's being so particular about being in your face about it. He's putting out statements talking about how we're going to sell Venezuelan oil for America's benefits, and his vice president is going on Fox News and saying, we can't let a country like Venezuela have access to the world's largest oil reserves and not be in the control of the United States. They're going to the UN and saying that openly, that we can't let countries not aligned with the United States have access to the world's largest energy reserves. I think the reason they're being so public about it is that they're conditioning our minds to accept this as a new normal. So if this can be done in Venezuela, which is still within the Western Hemisphere under the so-called Monroe Doctrine, I guess what a lot of people also miss out is that the Monroe Doctrine doesn't preclude Africa. It says Western Hemisphere, but It doesn't, there's no borderline where Africa is excluded from that definition of the Monroe Doctrine, right? The Monroe Doctrine only specifies that the Western Hemisphere is the dominion of the US, but it doesn't specify where that definition of Western Hemisphere ends. Because by some definitions, you could say that the coast of West Africa is part of that, is part of that Monroe Doctrine, which would place Nigeria squarely in the crosshairs. Now, as I've tried to analyze previously, to very little effect in Nigeria, given the very unique kind of people that we are, um, West Africa offers a very unique value proposition to the US at this point in time. So the primary reason for wanting a foothold in West Africa, apart from obviously wanting to counter the rise of the AES, wanting to regain control of those three countries, potentially hand them back to France. Obviously, we know that that is a very, very big factor in all of this. But apart from that, the Sahelian West Africa is one of the world's most resource-stacked areas, specifically the resources that are all the rage now. Rare earth minerals and lithium, which are all the rage because they are basically ubiquitous in every kind of electronic or military application going forward. So anyone who controls the global supply of rare earth minerals is basically going to be the world's military hegemon, or at least that's the calculation that has been made in Washington. Now, China made a strategic move last year. It restricted exports of refined rare earth minerals to the US. And as you know, basically, China controls something like 90% of the world's supply of refined rare earth minerals. So that was when you then had people in Trump's administration coming out and saying that they want to build out their own rare earth mineral supply chain in 2 years. 2 years is very optimistic. Obviously, that's probably not going to happen. But the point is, of all the places on the planet that have these minerals in sufficient concentration, where can they be found where that isn't under the direct control of a major geopolitical player already? The only place in the world that satisfies those parameters is Sahelian West Africa, which includes like almost half of Nigeria, by the way. Right. So that includes the Sahelian Alliance, that includes Nigeria, that includes Chad, that includes Eritrea. The entire Sahel belt is, flooded with those things.